Look at this photograph. It's a 116-year-old picture depicting a child that is fascinated about a camera in front of them. But if we take a closer look, there are a lot of things going on. First off, this kid is an Igorrote coming from the mountain province of Pamtok, and the setting here is in Louisiana. There is also a man at the side of the shot that kinda looks like he's trying to move away from the frame. What's really going on here? And what would it look like if it was colorized?
But wait, why do we need to colorize it? And how are we going to colorize old photos? Suppose we have this black and white photo of this coin. Coins as it is can vary in colors depending on what it's made of. It could look like it's silver, could be bronze, or even copper. But in order for us to substantiate our claims on what it truly is, we need that evidence. And for that, we have a process. No, it's process. Think of it as a Venn diagram, No, the one with circles in it. Yeah, okay, sure, close enough. Think of it as a Venn diagram, where each stages has its own characteristics, where we could visualize the similarities of all criteria within the stages. The stages consists of assessment, research, and colorization. Going back to the coin, we could read from the sides of it that it says United States of America and 1908. That is what assessment is, noting certain data and details from the photograph that could give us clues on what it is. And for the research process, a quick search from this website with a database of millions of coins from different countries, different values, and different year of production, we could easily identify what coin it really is. Unfortunately, since we do not know how much this coin truly is, we could have two answers. One made out of bronze, while the other made out of copper and nickel, to which gives this silverish hue. Therefore, with the data and research we got, we could conclude that this coin could look like it's silver, due to a certain mintage was made out of copper and nickel. At the same time, it could look like it's bronze, since a certain mintage was also made out of bronze. But still, why? Remember the research process that we just had earlier? In it, we got to see what's at the back of the coin. See anything noticeable? At the back of it, it has Filipinas written on it, indicating that this coin was never used in America. Rather, it was a coin used during the colonization of America in the Philippines. And that's exactly what it means to colorize old photos. We're not just colorizing it for the fun of it, rather, to shed some light about certain things that we never bothered to ask or question, or in this case, research upon. Now, let's go back to this photograph. If we use the Venn diagram, starting with... What's this? Look, I'ma say this politely. Again, the Venn diagram is the one with circles on it. And I swear if you put circles on his body, I'ma shave one of your eyebrows. Good. Going back, starting with the assessment. Since this is much more complicated than the coin, we must note the things that we already know about the photograph, such as it's a 116-year-old, taken in Louisiana, and the kid here is from the Philippines, specifically from the tribe of Igorrotes. We must also note of the things that can be deduced out of our mere observation of the photograph, observations that could give us much better understanding of the photograph. For example, look at the shadows here. Notice how visible it is, like the shadows of the trees at the back? This would indicate that this could have been taken right between 10 AM or 3 PM, which gives it ample sunlight for shadows to be visible. And remember this foot here? This foot about to do the cha-cha slide? We're going to do some research about him that would give us an understanding whether to remove him or not. And oh yeah, This photograph was taken by Miss Jessie Tarbuck's Beals. Hello! But we're gonna talk about her later. For now, let's go on to research. For this photograph, we have two main things to research about. First off, the kid, to find proper evidences on our claims of what sort of color is his bahag, including his skin color. And secondly, this camera, in which to research and identify what sort of brand and what kind is it, in order for us to have a proper evidence for our colorization to be a success. Let us start with Singwa. In order for us to have an idea what sort of skin color does he have, we need to take a look at his culture. And what we know about him is he is an Igorrote, which in their culture, children are tasked with chores and are encouraged to work with their families at a very young age. And if you're doing your chores for most of the time underneath the sun, that will lead to a much darker skin color or a tanned skin. Regarding his clothing, most of us in the Philippines know this kind of clothing is called bahag, or in English, a G-string clothing. But according to this 1905 book written by Albert Jenks, there are 4 variations of this kind of clothing: the sangkitan, ikit, kakot, and kaching. And based on the description of Albert Jenks, what Singwa could have been wearing that day is a variation of sangkitan. Alongside with this, Igorrote textiles were inspired by nature itself, therefore having a lot of intricate details on it. But here's the problem. We don't see any of those intricate patterns and details on this photograph. But since we're gonna do this in Photoshop, I'm pretty sure we can do something about it. But for now, let's move on to the camera. Since the birth of photography in the 1840s through the daguerreotype, different types of processes were invented to create photographs. By 1850s, merely 10 years after the invention of the daguerreotype, calotype and stereoscopic photography was invented. In 1851, wet collodion process was invented, and by 1870s, triplate photography was discovered, and it revolutionized photography. For one, triplates were much more light sensitive than the earlier processes, which means photographers didn't have to wait 15 to 30 minutes subjecting the plate with chemicals on it through light just to take a photograph. Then by 1888, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked Char. Everything changed when this bloke pulled up. This is George Eastman. And who is George Eastman? Well, he's the one who said, "Are you lost, baby girl? I got something to show you." Then Ting Tang Walla Walla Bing Bang, the world's first commercially produced camera. It was the original Kodak camera that was marketed as a camera that can be used anytime, anywhere, and by anyone. Within 60 years, different processes, brands, and manufacturers produced cameras. Therefore, identifying this camera would almost be impossible. However, if we had someone who could tell us about this camera, someone who used it, someone who has long hair and revolutionized an entire industry who can give us a clue on what sort of camera this is, not you, I'm talking about Jessie Tarbuck's Beals. This is Jessie Tarbuck's Beals. She was a teacher by trade, but her life changed in 1888, where she won a small camera for selling magazine subscriptions. By 1900, 3 years after she won the camera, she left teaching to be a freelance photographer. And in that same year, she received her first credit line from Vermont's Windham County Reformer for her photographs. With this, she is accredited as America's first published woman photojournalist. In November of 1902, Jessie broke into full-time professional news photography. She moved to New York City and was employed by Buffalo Inquirer and The Courier. According to her biography, she was using an 8x10 camera. And since she was employed in a company based in New York City, we could look into camera manufacturers based into that same city. Within this list, only one of which produced 8x10 cameras that look similar to this. And lo and behold, the rock is the optical company, the Pony Premium Senior, a dry plate camera produced in 1897. During that time, this was sold for $60, which in today's standard would be at $1,854, enough to buy a new MacBook. These sorts of cameras were relatively hard to use, and for a few reasons. First, you always need a black cloth to cover yourself while taking a picture. That's because the display of these cameras was just glass. Therefore, if the environment was too bright, you'd barely see anything on your display without this black cloth. Second, it still takes quite some time in order for you to take a picture. You'd have to set the subject first, check if your subject is within the frame, set the lens by moving this forward or back. Once set, you slide your plate in, and that's the time you take your photograph. And lastly, since these cameras were still using plates, not film, she'd have to carry a whole luggage just for her plates. That's where this bloke comes up. He is an assistant that carries this monstrosity of a luggage, and yes, he owns our mystery foot. Now, with all said and done, we now have everything we need to colorize this. Let's start the montage. That is how to colorize a 116-year-old photograph. But hold up, we still don't know yet why a child from the mountain province of Pontoc was in Louisiana. Well, for us to understand that, we have to go back 6 years before this photograph was taken, in 1898. The same year when the Philippines was just winning their hard-fought war against the Spaniards. But the problem was, Spain was also in war against America. On the 12th of June 1898, the Philippines won against the Spaniards and claimed their independence. But a war against America and Spain was still ongoing. And on the 10th of December 1898, this happened. This is Jules Cambon, the French ambassador to the United States signing the Treaty of Paris, a treaty that ends the war between America and Spain. But here's the catch. Spain needed money for fighting two wars at once. Therefore, Spain sold the Philippines to the Americans for $20 million, which in today's standard is $617,816,867.47 enough to buy 7,269 new Model X's from Tesla. Now, since America is now colonizing the Philippines, there is a new problem. The Filipinos won't have it. And in 1899, the Philippine-American War broke out, where this bloke comes in. This is Dr. Truman Hunt, an army doctor that was assigned to fight and aid the American troops here in the Philippines. After the war in 1902, he decided to stay here, and along with his mates from the war, they traveled to Bontoc. There, he became a bit of a celebrity. With his skills as a doctor, he became friends with the governor and made him a lieutenant, and the locals loved him for what he could do. But across the Atlantic Ocean, there was another problem in America. Not a lot of Americans were on board with the predicament of colonizing the Philippines. The government was criticized and ridiculed for imposing too much power and force during the Philippine-American War. But the government had a plan to convince the people that colonizing the Philippines was different, that it was of moral duty and public consciousness to educate the Filipino people. It was called the benevolent assimilation, an argument that America is colonizing the Philippines to educate its people. Therefore, schools were set up, hospitals were built, and the Filipino people were taught the English language. Until in 1904, St. Louis opened its doors to the world for the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, or St. Louis World's Fair. The intention was to display different kinds of marvel of technology, agriculture, art, history, and amusement. People from different states and countries went to see this glorious exposition. What the people didn't know was that the US government spent 1.5 million US dollars to bring all those Filipinos from different tribes to the fair, just to assert the benevolent assimilation argument. 1,300 Filipino natives, 40 different tribes, 75,000 exhibits, 130 buildings, and 725 soldiers were included in the display. And remember this bloke? He became the manager for the Igorrotes that was brought to the fair. And the Igorrotes were popular, so much so that even the daughter of President Roosevelt, Alice Roosevelt, went out to see them. This photograph does not only depict this pure and innocent moment between a child who is seeing a camera for the very first time in his life. It also depicts a much darker history not only for Filipinos but also for the Americans. It depicts the daunting moment for the lives of these people, to be immersed in a new country, culture, technology, and meeting new people. A reminder of the dismal exploitation of these people for a political argument to justify the colonization of another country. Hi, I'm Romeo Lima Oscar and thank you for watching the pilot episode of Colored History. For anyone who's asking what the hell is that, Colored History is a new show that is about colorizing old photographs and breaking them down into bits and pieces to shed some light about certain parts of our history. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel to support it, and at the same time hit the bell icon to get notifications for new videos weekly, and I promise you, there will be a lot more.